Intro music, slow, melancholic piano melody with a subtle building orchestral undertone, hinting at unspoken weight and future triumph. Scene opens on a dimly lit yet meticulously clean janitorial closet. The sound of a distant executive buzzes. Soft, ambient office noise filters in. Dust motes dance in the single shaft of light slicing through a grimy window. Close up on a pair of worn, scuffed leather shoes. They are old, the soles peeling slightly at the edges, the leather cracked like dry earth. Hands, calloused and deeply tanned, gently touch the shoes. These are Elijah's hands. My name is Elijah, and these were my uniform for 23 years. 23 years I walked these polished halls, mopped these gleaming floors, emptied these overflowing bins. This company, Sterling Enterprises, it was built on the sweat of men like me, men who never saw their names on any plaque, their faces on any brochure, just the shadow, cleaning up after the light. I remember the day like it was yesterday, or maybe I just remember it too well because it carved itself into my memory, a scar I still feel. It was Tuesday, a particularly crisp autumn Tuesday. The air outside still held a hint of summer warmth, but inside Sterling Enterprises, the air was always controlled, always sterile. I was polishing the grand staircase in the lobby, the one that led to the executive suites. It was my favorite spot. From there, I could almost feel the pulse of the whole operation, hear the important calls, the sharp decisions, the deals being struck. My son, Daniel, he had a school play that night. He was playing a tree, a proud oak, he'd told me, with roots that reached deep. He'd been practicing his lines for weeks, his little voice full of such earnest ambition. I saved every dime I could for a decent pair of shoes for him, something that wouldn't look as tired as mine. He deserved to stand tall, even as a tree. That Tuesday, I was rushing a little. I'd been working a double shift. My own shoes, these very ones, were bothering me. A blister was throbbing on my heel. I'd planned to go straight to the shoe store after work. But then, Mr. Sterling himself, or rather, the man who acted like Mr. Sterling, Mr. Thorne, the head of acquisitions, he was coming down the stairs, his entourage trailing behind him. Lawyers, I think. Sharp suits, sharp smiles. I tried to be invisible. That's the trick when you're a janitor. Blend into the walls. Become part of the decor. I stepped back, my mop bucket beside me, my worn shoes silent on the marble. Or so I thought. Mr. Thorne stopped. Right there, on the third step down. He looked at me, not a polite glance, but a gaze that stripped you bare. His eyes, sharp and cold as glacial ice, went straight to my feet. And then he smiled. Not a kind smile, a cruel, amused curl of his lip. My word, he drawled, his voice carrying, amplified by the cavernous lobby. His companions paused, their eyes following his. Look at these, gentlemen. Almost as old as the company itself, wouldn't you say? Are you aware of the dress code, my good man? Or is this what Sterling Enterprises considers appropriate attire for our esteemed staff? Laughter, a ripple of polite but dismissive chuckles. It was like a physical blow. My face burned. My hands clenched. I looked down at my shoes, the cracked leather, the peeling soles. They were humble. They were humble because I was humble, because I had to be. They were a testament to years of sacrifice, of late nights and early mornings, of choosing Daniel's needs over my own. But to him, they were just an embarrassment, a stain on his pristine world. He didn't wait for an answer. He wouldn't. He probably thought I was beneath even acknowledging. He swept past me, his expensive leather shoes, polished to a mirror shine, barely grazing the floor. His words, however, echoed in the sudden, thick silence. Mockery, humiliation, laid bare for everyone to see. They saw a janitor. They saw broken shoes. They didn't see the years of dedication. They didn't see the Father's love. They didn't see anything beyond the surface. I stood there for a long moment, the polished marble suddenly feeling like quicksand, the weight of it all pressed down. Not just the shame, but the sheer suffocating injustice of it, of being judged, dismissed, and ridiculed for something so small, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, yet so deeply personal. My broken shoes, my pride, shattered with a few careless words. But as I stood there, the sting of his words slowly giving way to something else, something colder and harder, a flicker ignited within me, a quiet defiance, a promise whispered to the polished marble and the indifferent air. They had seen my worn-out shoes, but they hadn't seen me. Not really. And they certainly hadn't seen my son. Music swelled slightly, a hint of determination emerging. The polished marble floor of Sterling Corp gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a mirror to the opulence I was forbidden to touch. Each step echoed, a drumbeat of my inadequacy. My worn soles, patched with duct tape and hope, felt like a siren's wail, announcing my trespass. I was here for my boy, for David. He'd been offered an internship, a chance, and I'd felt a surge of pride so potent it almost drowned out the gnawing fear. Almost. Mr. Sterling, a man whose tailored suit seemed woven from disdain, strode towards me. His eyes, sharp and dismissive, landed on my feet. His lips curled, a sneer that was as old as time, as cruel as the history etched into my skin. "Having trouble with your footwear, janitor?" he'd said, his voice dripping with contempt. The laughter that followed was a pack of hyenas, tearing at my dignity. David, bless his brave heart, had stepped forward, his own shoes far too new, too bright, to stand beside mine. He'd tried to defend me, to stand up to the storm, but Sterling's words, laced with the venom of generations, had cut him down too. I saw the hurt flicker in David's eyes, a reflection of my own shame. That night, I'd sat alone in my small apartment, the silence amplifying the sting. I'd looked at my shoes, the faithful companions of my labor, and felt a resolve harden within me. It wasn't just about pride. It was about legacy. It was about the future I was fighting for David, for all those who walked in worn-out shoes. He'd said, "You call this shoes?" Sterling, standing over me, the words, sharp as broken glass, landed not on my feet but in my gut. His gaze swept over me, a predator assessing its prey, and it landed, with sickening finality, on my shoes. The duct tape, a testament to my constant hustle, my quiet struggle, was a badge of shame in his eyes. His manicured finger, adorned with a ring that cost more than my monthly rent, pointed. "Seriously, man, you're going to walk around this building, my building, looking like that?" The other executives, a constellation of expensive cologne and bored expressions, chuckled. It wasn't a kind sound. It was the sound of the privileged mocking the marginalized, the comfortable dismissing the desperate. David, my David, stood there, his face a mask of controlled anger. He's always been the quiet one, the thoughtful one, but I saw the fire in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend me, to defend us. But before he could utter a word, Sterling cut him off with a wave of his hand, as if swatting away a fly. "Your father," he said, his voice dripping with insincere pity, "doesn't seem to grasp the concept of presentation. This is Sterling Corp. We don't do that." My chest tightened. It wasn't just about the shoes. It was about the implication. It was about everything I represented in his eyes: the janitor, the black man, the perpetual outsider. David's hand, reaching out, hesitated. He knew, just as I did, that any words spoken now would be twisted, amplified, used against us. So I swallowed the lump in my throat. I looked down at my feet, at the worn leather, the peeling tape. I forced a weak smile, a mask I'd perfected over years of enduring such indignities. "My apologies, Mr. Sterling," I'd said, my voice a low rumble, carefully devoid of the storm brewing inside. "They've seen better days. I'll get them sorted." Sterling simply nodded, a dismissive gesture, then turned his back, rejoining his flock. The laughter faded as they walked away, leaving me standing there, the echo of their amusement a phantom limb. David finally moved, his hand finding my arm. His grip was tight, a silent promise of solidarity. But even in that moment, in the solidarity of my son, I felt a chill. Sterling Corp was a fortress, and I was outside, looking in, my broken shoes a stark reminder of the insurmountable distance. I looked at David, at the hope I saw struggling to survive in his young eyes, and a silent vow formed in my heart. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Sound of distant city traffic, faint but persistent. A sigh. "They always ask, always. So what do you do?" It's a simple question, right? Like asking the sky what color it is. But for me, it's always been a minefield, a tightrope walk over a canyon of judgment. Because the truth is usually too heavy for the air in those sterile air-conditioned rooms. Too real. Last Tuesday, it was worse. So much worse. That gala at the Grand Oak Haven. My son, David, he insisted. "Dad, it's important. You need to be there." He works there, you see. Not in the C-suite. Not with the shiny suits and the practiced smiles. No, David's the muscle behind the magic. The quiet engineer who makes the whole damn system hum. He'd been promoted finally. A rare step for a black man in that place. And he wanted his father there. His father. A janitor. I tried to explain. "Son, those people, they'll look right through me. Or worse, they'll see me and it won't be pretty." He just waved it off. "It's family, Dad. That's all that matters." So I went, polished my shoes. The ones I've had for, well, too long. They're comfortable, you know. They've walked these halls more times than most of the executives have slept in their beds. They've seen the late nights, the early mornings, the quiet desperation of keeping a place like this spotless. But they're not fancy. They're not Italian leather. They're just worn. I stood by the entrance, feeling like a ghost. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the clinking of champagne glasses. Then he appeared. Mr. Sterling. He was one of David's bosses. A man with a face like a clenched fist and eyes that scanned everything like it was trash to be categorized. He was laughing with some other men, their voices like grinding gears. He stopped. His gaze, which had been sweeping the room, landed on me. And it didn't just land. It lodged itself like a splinter. He tilted his head, that condescending smirk twisting his lips. "Well, well," he drawled, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Look what the cat dragged in. Mr. Johnson, isn't it? I didn't realize we were hosting the cleaning staff at this level of the festivities." His companions chuckled. A hollow, cruel sound. I felt a heat crawl up my neck. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was that familiar, suffocating shame. The one that whispers you're not good enough, not worthy of breathing the same air. He took a step closer, his eyes fixated on my feet, on my shoes. He gestured with a manicured finger. "My dear man," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "are those hand-me-downs from the thrift store? Perhaps you should be tending to the facilities where such footwear is more appropriate. We wouldn't want you to trip and fall, now would we? Imagine the mess. And who would clean that up? The laughter around him grew louder. A few people turned to stare. I could feel their eyes, sharp and judgmental. They saw a janitor, a black man in worn-out shoes, and they saw nothing else. Nothing of the man who raised a brilliant son. Nothing of the years of silent dignity, of working twice as hard for half as much. Nothing of the dreams I'd tucked away, year after year, for my children. My hands clenched at my sides. David. David was somewhere in this building, probably oblivious. And here I was, being publicly dismantled, piece by piece, over a pair of shoes. My own son's promotion, the reason I was even standing there, became a source of profound humiliation. I opened my mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat like dust. All I could see was Sterling's face, contorted with amusement, and in that moment, the grand oak haven, the glittering chandeliers, the expensive suites. It all felt like a stage for my own degradation. The weight of it all, the injustice, the sheer casual cruelty threatened to crush me. But then something shifted deep inside. A tiny ember, long dormant, began to glow. A memory, my mother's voice, strong and steady. Never let them define you, Samuel. Never let their blindness be your darkness. I looked at Sterling, not with defiance, but with a quiet, unwavering gaze. My voice, when it finally came, was low, a rumble from a place he couldn't fathom. These shoes, I said, my eyes meeting his, have carried me through a lot, more than you could ever understand, Mr. Sterling. He blinked, a flicker of surprise in his usually unreadable eyes. The laughter around him faltered. Something in my tone, something in my stillness had broken the spell. I didn't say more. I couldn't. But I held his gaze, and in that silent exchange, a promise was made. Not out loud, not to him, but to myself, and to the memory of my mother. A promise that the man standing there, in his broken shoes, was not the man they thought they saw, and that the story, for them, was far from over. Sound of a door closing, softly. The distant traffic fades slightly. Sound of distant city traffic. Then a softer, more intimate hum as the narration begins. A faint, melancholic piano melody underscores the scene. It was like the air in that office turned thick, heavy. The fluorescent lights, usually so sterile, seemed to buzz with a cruel, mocking energy. Mr. Sterling's words, though, they were the loudest sound in the room. They echoed, bouncing off the polished mahogany desk, off the framed degrees on the wall, and straight into the hollow space where my pride used to sit. Inadequate, unfit. Those were the words he used. For me, for my shoes, for everything I was. In his eyes. He looked at me, not with pity. No, that would have been too kind. He looked with that cold, dismissive stare. The kind that says, "You don't belong here." He didn't see the late nights I spent cleaning his floors, scrubbing away the grime so his world could stay pristine. He didn't see the calluses on my hands, the ache in my back. He saw only the worn soles, the scuffs, the places where the leather had given way to time, and countless miles walked in service. My son, Marcus. He would have hated this. He always told me to get new shoes. "Dad," he'd say, his young voice full of a concern that always made my heart ache, "you deserve better." I'd just smile. What was the point? They were just shoes, tools. What mattered was the work, the dignity in the work, or so I thought. Then came the laughter, not a hearty shared laugh, but a sharp, brittle sound. Sterling's associates, their faces, a blur of expensive suits and smug expressions, turned towards me. Their eyes, like Sterling's, held that same disdain. They were enjoying this, my humiliation. It was a spectacle for them, a moment of entertainment. I felt a tremor run through me, not of fear, not any more. It was something else, a quiet hardening, a deep, abiding anger that had been simmering for years, gathering strength in the shadows of every condescending glance, every dismissive word. Sterling thought he had won. He thought he had exposed my weakness, my lack of status. He saw the broken shoes and thought he saw the broken man. But he didn't see the fire I carried inside, the one that had been forged in the heart of every challenge, every struggle, every time I had to prove myself twice as hard for half the recognition. He didn't know about the dreams I'd planted for my children, about the sacrifices I'd made, about the quiet strength I drew from the love of my family. I looked at Mr. Sterling, really looked at him, his expensive watch, the subtle gleam of his cufflinks, the perfectly knotted tie, all symbols of his wealth, his power, and for a fleeting second I saw them not as insurmountable barriers, but as mere possessions, things, things that could be acquired, things that, in the grand scheme of things, meant less than the quiet dignity I held within myself. A strange calm settled over me. The laughter of his associates faded into a dull roar. The buzzing lights seemed to dim, as if even they recognized the futility of their mockery. I didn't need to say anything. My silence was my armor, my composure, my defiance. I simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging his words, but not accepting their truth, acknowledging his power, but not bowing to it. Then I turned. My worn shoes, still making that soft, familiar sound on the polished floor, carried me away from that room, away from the judgment, but not away from the memory. That memory would be a seed that would grow into something he could never, ever anticipate, something that would, in time, make him understand the true cost of his arrogance. The journey back to my small apartment felt longer than usual. Each step a quiet promise to myself, to Marcus, to the man I knew I was, beyond the scuffed leather and the fraying soles. Sound of distant city hum, a lone car passing, gentle melancholic piano chords begin to swell, then fade slightly under narration. The laughter echoed in my head long after they'd finally left. Mr. Sterling and his sycophants, their faces contorted in mock sympathy, their eyes cold, judgmental. They saw a janitor. They saw worn soles, scuffed leather, threads unraveling like a forgotten promise. They saw a failure. They didn't see the late nights, the overtime shifts, scrubbing floors when my back screamed, the sacrifices made to keep a roof over my son's head, to put food on his plate, to give him the chances I never had. My hands, still rough from the industrial strength cleaner, clenched into fists inside my pockets. It wasn't the shoes themselves. It was what they represented to them. A badge of poverty, a mark of inferiority. And in that moment, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the lobby, surrounded by polished marble and the expensive scent of success, I felt smaller than I ever had. Smaller than a speck of dust, less significant than the discarded coffee cup in the bin. I remembered the day I bought those shoes. A sale at the discount store. I'd debated it for weeks. Money was tight. My old ones had holes so big you could see the pavement through them. But Michael had that science fair project. He needed to walk miles to the library. I couldn't send him out with his feet exposed. So I bought them, treated myself to a cheap, sturdy pair. They weren't much, but they were mine. They were my hard work, and they were, in their own way, a symbol of hope. Mr. Sterling's booming voice, dripping with insincere concern, sliced through my thoughts. Perhaps Mr. Henderson here could use a donation, a fresh start, a new pair of appropriate footwear. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Get this man out of here! He's embarrassing us! My chest tightened. I wanted to lash out, to shout about the years I'd poured into this company, the invisible labor that kept their pristine offices from descending into chaos, to tell them about the dreams I held for my son, the dreams fueled by every single scrub brush stroke, every mop swing. But I said nothing. What could I say? They wouldn't hear me. They'd only see the worn-out shoes. I just nodded, a curt, defeated nod, and then I turned and walked away. The sound of their renewed laughter, hushed now, followed me down the corridor. Each step felt heavier than the last. I walked back to the utility closet. The faint scent of bleach, a comfort in its familiarity. I locked the door. The click, a definitive sound. I leaned against the cool metal, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel Michael's eyes on me sometimes, that worried crease between his brow. He never complained, never asked for more. But I saw it, the quiet understanding of our struggle. He was smart, so smart. His mind was a universe of possibilities, a stark contrast to the limitations they were trying to impose on me. He deserved more than this, more than seeing his father humiliated for something as trivial as worn-out shoes. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I scrolled through my contacts, my gaze landing on a name I hadn't dialed in months. It felt like a betrayal, reaching out. But I was beyond pride now. I needed to do something, something real, something that would silence the whispers, that would erase the shame. I pressed the call button. Sound of a phone ringing, echoing slightly. A pause, then a click as the call is answered. "Dad?" Michael's voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension. I took a deep, shaky breath. "Michael, son, I need to talk to you. It's important." Music swelled slightly, a note of anticipation and unresolved emotion. Scene start. Enter. Luxury. Hotel lobby. Day. The hum of hushed conversations. Polished marble gleams under a colossal chandelier. Sunlight streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The air smells of expensive perfume and old money. My father, Elijah, stands near a towering potted palm, a stark figure in his slightly too small suit. He's trying to blend in, but his eyes betray his unease. He clutches a worn leather briefcase, the same one he'd carried for 20 years. It looks as out of place as he feels. Across the lobby, a group of men in sharp suits laugh. One of them, Mr. Abernathy, a man whose face is perpetually set in a sneer, spots my father. He nudges the man beside him, a younger executive with slicked back hair. They both turn to stare. Abernathy's laugh cuts through the genteel murmur. It's a harsh, grating sound. Abernathy, loudly, for all to hear. "Well, well, look who it is. Still keeping the toilets sparkling, Elijah? I didn't know we allowed the janitorial staff to attend board meetings." The younger executive snickers, looking down at my father's shoes. They're scuffed, the soles a little worn. They're good shoes, or they were. But life on concrete floors and long hours takes its toll. Young executive, mockingly. "Those shoes have seen more action than some of our high-priced consultants. Probably got more mileage than Abernathy's ego." Abernathy claps him on the back, his eyes still fixed on my father, a predatory gleam in them. Abernathy. Indeed, though I suspect the wear and tear comes from polishing floors, not power lunches. You know, Elijah, for a moment there, I thought you were trying to pass for someone important. Almost. The laughter erupts again, a wave of scorn washing over my father. He doesn't flinch. His hands tighten on his briefcase, his knuckles white. I can see his jaw muscles working, a silent battle raging within him. He's absorbing it all, letting it fuel a fire that's been smoldering for decades. I'm watching from the edge of the lobby, hidden behind a velvet rope that separates the common areas from the exclusive meeting rooms. My heart pounds against my ribs. This is it, the moment I've replayed 1,000 times in my head, the moment that ignited everything. Abernathy, emboldened by his audience, takes a step closer. Abernathy, don't worry, Elijah. When this deal is done, perhaps I'll have a nice shiny pair of brand new shoes for you as a retirement gift, provided you can find a suitable place to polish them. He laughs again, a venomous sound. The younger executive's gaze lingers on my father's face, searching for a crack, a sign of defeat. But there's no defeat in my father's eyes. There's something else, a quiet, unyielding strength, a deep well of patience that has seen worse. I know that look. It's the look of a man who has carried the weight of the world, and then some. He meets Abernathy's gaze directly. His voice, when he finally speaks, is calm, steady, cutting through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. Elijah, Mr. Abernathy, you seem to have a peculiar fascination with my footwear. Perhaps you should concern yourself with the foundation of your own empire, rather than the soles of a working man's shoes. Some foundations, you see, are built on far less solid ground than they appear. Abernathy blinks, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected retort. The younger executive's smirk falters. Abernathy scoffs. Is that supposed to be a threat, Elijah? Or just the ramblings of a man who can't afford to get his own feet wet? My father offers a small, knowing smile. It doesn't reach his eyes. Elijah, neither, Mr. Abernathy. It is simply an observation and a promise. He turns, his back straightening a fraction more. He doesn't rush, doesn't show any outward sign of anger. He simply walks away, his worn shoes making soft, deliberate sounds on the marble floor. He walks towards the elevators, towards the future. I watch him go, a knot of fierce pride and cold resolve tightening in my chest. He doesn't need my intervention here. Not yet, but he's planted the seed. And soon, very soon, that seed will bloom into something terrifyingly beautiful. I pull out my phone, my thumb hovering over a contact. The younger executive is still watching the direction my father went, a flicker of confusion on his face. Abernathy is already turning away, eager to resume his important business. They think it's over. They think they've won. They have no idea, not even a glimmer. The real game is just about to begin. Scene end. The air in the boardroom still hummed with that suffocating silence. You could cut it with a dull knife. My father, Reverend Elias, stood there, a shadow cast by the very light he'd helped build. His worn soles, a testament to a life spent walking paths others wouldn't even glance at. Mr. Stirling's laughter, that ugly, grating sound, still echoed in the polished mahogany chamber, a phantom limb of his disdain. He'd thrown my father's pride on the floor like yesterday's trash, all because of shoes. Just shoes. I watched it all. From the door, a fly on the wall, my heart a thunderclap against my ribs. Every sneer, every condescending syllable, it was a fresh wound. I saw the flicker of hurt in my father's eyes, the way his shoulders slumped just a fraction, the ghost of a man who'd always stood so tall. He didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves this. Not after everything he'd given this company. Not after the sacrifices he'd made, the dreams he'd deferred, the quiet dignity he'd maintained through years of being invisible. Stirling, with his silk tie and his diamond cufflinks, saw a janitor. He saw a problem to be swept away, a stain on his perfect white world. He didn't see the hands that cleaned the floors where his deals were made. He didn't see the back that bent to ensure his comfort. He didn't see the mind that absorbed every whisper, every overheard conversation, every strategic move made in these hallowed halls. He didn't see the father, and that's where he made his fatal mistake. He saw the janitor, but he didn't see the son. He didn't see the future. He didn't see the fire that had been stoked in my gut, a slow burn that had been simmering for years, fed by 1,000 similar indignities, both witnessed and endured. My father, bless him, just nodded, a quiet, defeated nod. He turned, his back a map of weariness, and walked away. He walked out of that room, out of that building, carrying his dignity like a fragile, precious bird. I wanted to run after him, to scream at Sterling, to shatter the illusion of his superiority. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not my moment to explode. This was my moment to build. I waited. I let the silence settle. I let Sterling and his cronies bask in their victory, in their smug assurance that they had put a poor black man in his place. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over. They were wrong. So very, very wrong. I left the building that day, not with anger, but with a cold, hard resolve. The image of my father's shoes, those worn-out, faithful companions, was burned into my mind. They weren't just shoes. They were symbols, symbols of a life of service, of quiet strength, of being overlooked. And I swore, right then and there, that those symbols would be erased, not by hiding them, but by owning them, by buying the very ground they walked on, by rewriting the narrative Sterling had so cruelly authored. The calls were made that night, discreet, precise, executed with the quiet efficiency of a surgeon. Every detail was laid out, every contingency planned. I wasn't acting on impulse. I was acting on years of preparation, years of watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment, the moment when the predator, so sure of his dominance, would finally reveal his true nature. And that moment had arrived. Sterling had shown his hand. He'd laid bare his prejudice, and in doing so, he'd handed me the keys to his kingdom. The whispers started soon after, small, hesitant at first, like hesitant raindrops before a storm. Rumors of a new player, a significant investor making inquiries, asking questions that made the old guard nervous. Sterling, of course, dismissed them. A minor tremor, he called it. Nothing to worry about. He was too busy counting his profits, too blinded by his own reflection in the polished glass of his tower. He didn't know that the storm was already gathering. He didn't know that the foundations of his empire were about to be shaken. He didn't know that the janitor's son was about to become his reckoning. Scene start. Int. Grand ballroom. Day. The air hums with a nervous energy. The opulent ballroom, draped in gold and deep crimson, is packed with the city's elite. Journalists, their cameras poised, mill about. Sunlight streams through impossibly tall windows, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the charged atmosphere. Across the vast space, Mr. Sterling, the CEO, stands rigid. His face, usually a mask of smug authority, is now a battlefield of disbelief and dawning horror. His eyes dart from the gleaming podium to the faces in the crowd, searching for an escape that isn't there. Standing beside him, Mark, the young lawyer, looks utterly defeated. His expensive suit feels like a costume. He clutches a folder, his knuckles white. And then there's Isaiah. He's no longer the janitor from the locker room, the man with the worn soles and the hunched shoulders. He's standing tall. His posture is straight, his gaze steady, And there's a quiet strength radiating from him that was always there, buried beneath the layers of hardship. He's wearing a simple, well-fitting suit, a stark contrast to the garish displays around him. Yet it somehow commands more respect than all the designer labels combined. He hasn't said a word since the revelation. He doesn't need to. The murmuring in the room has swelled to a roar of speculation and shock. Across the room, I watch Isaiah. My heart, which had been a drum of fear and anticipation, finally begins to slow. It's real. It's happening. The media scrum converges on Sterling, a pack of wolves sensing weakness. Questions fly, sharp and relentless. Mr. Sterling, is this true? Is Mr. Dubois the majority shareholder? What does this mean for the company's future? Sterling opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. He is trapped. His kingdom, built on a foundation of what? Arrogance, cruelty. It's crumbling around him. Isaiah finally steps forward, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the din. It's not loud, but it carries an authority that silences even the most aggressive reporters. Good afternoon, everyone. He pauses, letting his words settle. The silence is palpable. For many years, this company has been a symbol of ambition, of success. He glances ever so briefly towards Sterling, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. And for some of us, a place of work. He takes a breath. Today marks a new chapter, a chapter built on a foundation of equity and integrity. He looks out at the sea of faces, each one now turned towards him. He sees the surprise, the confusion, the dawning respect. He sees the people who once looked past him, who never saw him, now staring with open mouths. He thinks of his father, of the endless hours he spent cleaning these very floors, of the whispered insults, the dismissive glances, the way his father's worn shoes were a silent testament to a life of tireless effort, unacknowledged and unseen. He remembers the day his father came home, his shoulders sagging a little lower than usual. He'd been cleaning out a private office, a senior executive's office, when the executive had pointed at his shoes, scuffing them with his own expensive leather loafer. "These are a disgrace," he'd sneered. "You're a disgrace to this building, with those things on your feet." My father, a man who had taught me the meaning of hard work, of dignity, of perseverance, had simply nodded, too proud, too weary to retort. He'd gone back to his duties, his spirit dimmed by a small act of casual cruelty. But I hadn't forgotten. My father, Isaiah continues, his voice deepening with emotion, worked here for 32 years. He was a janitor, a good man. He pauses, a slight tremor in his voice, but his gaze remains unwavering. He poured his sweat, his dedication, his very life into this place, and he was treated as if he were invisible. He looks directly at Sterling now. Sterling flinches, his gaze fixed on the floor. He was often ridiculed for the state of his shoes, worn out, he was told, unfit. Isaiah's voice rises, not in anger, but in a calm, powerful assertion of truth. And yet, those shoes walked miles, carrying the weight of this company's cleanliness. They were the silent witnesses to countless hours of unseen labor. The murmuring begins again, a tidal wave of understanding. The journalists lean in, their microphones extended. This is the story, the raw, undeniable truth. Isaiah gestures slightly, encompassing the grand ballroom, the city skyline visible through the windows. Today, those shoes, and the man who wore them with such unwavering pride, are finally seen. They are recognized. And so is the legacy they represent. He turns back to the reporters. This company, he says, his voice ringing with a quiet resolve, will no longer be a place where worth is measured by the shine on one's shoes, but by the substance of one's character and the depth of one's contribution. He smiles, a genuine, almost melancholic smile. My father's shoes may have been broken, but his spirit was never. And it is that spirit, that unwavering strength, that now guides this company forward. We will build something new, something better, something just. He nods, a subtle, decisive gesture. The room is still. He has spoken. The narrative has shifted. The underestimation has been met with an undeniable, overwhelming power. He looks out at the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes meet mine. There's a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the journey, the pain, and the triumph. But then his gaze drifts, his expression becoming thoughtful, a hint of a new challenge appearing in his eyes. The immediate victory has been won, but the future is still unwritten. Scene end.